The blood-curdling scream that tore through the Oswald farm on that sweltering summer evening in 1872 would forever change the course of Olivia Owens' life, though not in the way her cruel brother Jeremiah intended when he raised his leather belt high above her trembling form. Olivia had dared to speak her mind at the dinner table, something women in Redemption Creek, Arizona territory, simply didn't do, especially not when it contradicted the man who'd become her guardian after their parents' passing 3 years prior. At 22, Olivia had endured Jeremiah's increasingly volatile temper since she was 19, when influenza had swept through their small frontier town, leaving her and her 16-year-old sister Eleanor orphaned and at the mercy of their older brother. "I told you to hold your tongue when men are speaking," Jeremiah roared, his face flushed crimson with rage as he cornered Olivia against the kitchen wall. Her offense had been suggesting that perhaps Eleanor shouldn't be forced to marry the aging shopkeeper Mr. Walters, a widower 30 years her senior who had been eyeing the younger Owens girl for months. "Eleanor is barely 18, Olivia had said during supper. "She deserves to choose her own husband." That simple declaration had sent Jeremiah into a fury. He'd upended the table, sending their meager meal crashing to the floor before ordering Eleanor to her room. Now, with the belt raised high, Olivia closed her eyes and braced for the sting of leather against her skin, a punishment she'd endured before, though never for speaking so directly against his authority. The blow never came. Instead, a firm, steady voice cut through the tense air of the farmhouse kitchen. "That's not how a man treats a lady." Olivia's eyes flew open. Framed in the doorway stood a tall figure silhouetted against the dying light of day. Broad-shouldered and imposing, the stranger stepped into the kitchen, and Olivia caught her first glimpse of the man who would change everything. He wore a dust-covered duster and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his eyes. A silver star gleamed on his vest, Redemption Creek's newly appointed deputy marshal. She'd heard whispers about him in town, but hadn't seen him until this moment. "This ain't your concern, lawman," Jeremiah snarled, lowering the belt slightly but not relinquishing his threatening stance. "This is family business." The deputy took another step forward, his spurs clinking softly against the wooden floorboards. "When a man raises a hand to a woman, it becomes my concern." His voice was quiet but carried an unmistakable edge of authority. "Lower that belt." Jeremiah's fingers tightened around the leather strap. "You're trespassing on my property, and you're about to break the law on it." The deputy's hand rested casually near his holstered pistol. "I'm Deputy Marshal Adam Quinn. I was riding by when I heard the commotion." "Now, I'll say it one more time, put the belt down." For a moment, Olivia thought her brother would defy the lawman. Then, with a muttered curse, Jeremiah tossed the belt onto the overturned table. "She's my sister. I have the right to discipline her as I see fit," he growled. Deputy Quinn shook his head slowly. "No, sir, you don't, not like that." He turned his attention to Olivia, his expression softening slightly. "Are you hurt, miss?" Olivia straightened her posture, gathering what dignity she could despite her tear-stained face and the wreckage of their evening meal surrounding her. "I'm fine, deputy. Thank you for your concern." Jeremiah's face contorted with barely contained rage. "Get out of my house." The deputy didn't move, his gaze remaining steadily on Olivia. "Miss, is there somewhere else you can stay tonight? Perhaps with a friend or neighbor?" Before Olivia could respond, Eleanor appeared in the doorway, her young face pale with fear. "Livy, what's happening?" "Nothing to concern yourself with, Ellie," Jeremiah snapped. "Get back to your room." Deputy Quinn's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Ladies, I believe it might be best if you both came with me into town tonight." just until things cool down here." "They're not going anywhere." Jeremiah stepped between his sisters and the lawman. "This is my family, my house, my decision." "Her brother tried to beat her for speaking," Deputy Quinn said, his voice carrying an edge of steel. "He won't again." His gaze locked with Jeremiah's. "Not while I'm wearing this badge." The tension in the room was palpable, thick as the summer air outside. Olivia glanced at Eleanor, seeing her own fear reflected in her sister's wide eyes. "We'll go," Olivia said firmly, finding strength in the deputy's steady presence. "Eleanor, fetch our shawls. You take one step toward that door and I'll—" Jeremiah began. "You'll what?" Deputy Quinn interrupted, his hand now resting openly on his holstered weapon. "Think carefully before you finish that threat, Mr. Owens." Jeremiah's mouth snapped shut, but the hatred in his eyes burned bright as coals. Olivia quickly gathered a few essential items while Eleanor did the same, both sisters moving with the efficiency born of long practice at avoiding their brother's wrath. Within minutes, they stood on the front porch of the farmhouse, the deputy's horse tethered nearby. "My wagon's in town," Deputy Quinn explained, helping Eleanor onto his horse. "We'll have to make do. Miss Owens, you can ride behind your sister. I'll walk alongside." Olivia hesitated, looking back at the house that had been her home her entire life. Jeremiah stood in the doorway, his silhouette dark and threatening. "This isn't over," he called out, his voice carrying in the evening air. "They're my responsibility. The town will side with me." Deputy Quinn didn't bother responding, simply offering his hand to help Olivia onto the horse. His palm was calloused but warm against her skin, and despite everything, Olivia felt a small flutter in her chest at the contact. As they made their way toward town, the setting sun casting long shadows across the dusty road, Olivia realized that for the first time in 3 years, she was breathing freely. The weight of constant fear had lifted, if only temporarily, and she found herself studying the profile of the man who had intervened when no one else in Redemption Creek ever had. Deputy Adam Quinn walked with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to the frontier. His features, now visible in the fading light, were striking strong jaw covered with several days' worth of stubble, eyes the color of a stormy sky, and lines around his mouth that suggested he wasn't a stranger to smiling, though his expression remained serious as they traveled. "Thank you," Olivia said softly, breaking the silence that had fallen over their small procession. "Most men in this town wouldn't have interfered." He glanced up at her, his expression unreadable in the gathering dusk. "Most men in this town should be ashamed then." The simple statement, delivered without flourish or expectation of praise, warmed something inside Olivia that had grown cold over the years of her brother's tyranny. She'd stopped believing that anyone would ever stand up to Jeremiah, who had cultivated a reputation as a hard-working, God-fearing man who'd sacrificed his own prospects to care for his orphaned sisters. Only those sisters knew the truth of what happened behind closed doors. "Where are you taking us?" Eleanor asked, her voice small with uncertainty. "Mrs. Holloway runs a boarding house on the edge of town," Deputy Quinn replied. "She's a good woman. She'll give you a safe place to stay tonight while we sort this out." "Sort what out?" Olivia couldn't help but ask. "Jeremiah is right about one thing: he's our legal guardian. The law is on his side." The deputy was quiet for a moment before answering. "The law is meant to protect people, Miss Owens, not give men license to terrorize their families." He looked up at her again. "How long has he been treating you this way?" Olivia hesitated, years of learned silence making the words difficult to form. "Since our parents died. 3 years ago. It wasn't always this bad." Eleanor's shoulders slumped. "It's gotten worse since he started drinking with the Miller brothers." Deputy Quinn nodded thoughtfully. I've had my eye on that group. Nothing but trouble. The lights of Redemption Creek appeared ahead. The small frontier town mostly dark except for the saloon, and a few scattered windows glowing warm against the night. As they approached the boarding house, a two-story white clapboard building set back from the main street, Olivia felt a peculiar mixture of relief and apprehension. Relief at escaping Jeremiah's immediate wrath, apprehension about what the morning would bring. Mrs. Holloway, a plump, gray-haired widow with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, opened the door at Deputy Quinn's knock, taking in the situation with a glance. "These ladies need a safe place to stay tonight, Mrs. Holloway," he explained. "It's a delicate situation." The older woman nodded without pressing for details. "I've got a room at the back, nice and quiet." She beckoned to Olivia and Eleanor. "Come in, dears. You look like you could use some hot tea and something to eat." As the sisters followed Mrs. Holloway inside, Olivia paused at the threshold, turning back to the deputy. "What happens tomorrow?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. His expression softened slightly. "Tomorrow, we start figuring out a better way forward for you and your sister. That's a promise, Miss Owens." It was a simple statement, not elaborate or dressed in flowery language, but something in his steady gaze made Olivia believe him. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt the faintest flicker of hope. "Good night, Deputy Quinn," she said, "and thank you again." He touched the brim of his hat. "Adam, my name is Adam." "Adam," she repeated softly. "I'm Olivia Owens." "Rest well, Miss Olivia," he said. "You're safe here." As Olivia closed the door behind her following Mrs. Holloway and Eleanor deeper into the house, she couldn't help but wonder if her life had just changed irrevocably, and whether the handsome deputy with the storm-colored eyes would keep the promises his words implied. Dawn broke over Redemption Creek with the promise of another scorching summer day. Olivia awoke disoriented, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar ceiling above her and the soft snoring of Eleanor beside her. Then the events of the previous evening came rushing back, and she sat up, her heart pounding. They had defied Jeremiah, left the farm, accepted help from a stranger. The consequences would be severe. Jeremiah never forgot a slight, and he would consider their departure the ultimate betrayal. Olivia's mind raced with possibilities, none of them pleasant. Would he come looking for them? Would he force them to return? What power did Deputy Quinn truly have against a man who was, by law, their rightful guardian? Eleanor stirred beside her. "Livy, where are we?" Olivia smoothed her sister's sleep-tousled hair. "Mrs. Holloway's boarding house, remember? We're safe." Eleanor's eyes clouded with worry. "For now. But Jeremiah will come for us." "Let's not think about that just yet," Olivia said, trying to project more confidence than she felt. "First, let's get dressed and see if Mrs. Holloway might spare us some breakfast." They found their hostess in the kitchen, bustling about preparing a meal that smelled heavenly after weeks of Jeremiah's increasingly sparse provisions. The farm was failing, another reason he'd been so eager to marry Eleanor off to the wealthy shopkeeper. "Good morning, dears," Mrs. Holloway greeted them warmly. "I hope you slept well. Sit down, sit down. Breakfast is nearly ready." Olivia and Eleanor took seats at the kitchen table, feeling awkward but grateful. "We can't thank you enough for your hospitality, Mrs. Holloway," Olivia said. "We'll find a way to repay your kindness." The older woman waved away her concerns. "Deputy Quinn explained enough for me to understand you needed shelter. No decent Christian could turn away young women in need." A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Mrs. Holloway wiped her hands on her apron and went to answer it, returning moments later with Deputy Quinn following behind her. In the clear light of morning, Olivia was struck anew by his presence. He'd cleaned up since the previous evening, his face freshly shaved and his clothes less dusty, though still worn with the signs of frontier life. "Miss Owens, Miss Eleanor," he greeted them with a tip of his hat. "I hope you slept well." "As well as could be expected, Deputy," Olivia replied, suddenly conscious of her rumpled appearance and hastily pinned hair. "Please sit down," Mrs. Holloway insisted, placing a plate of biscuits and bacon on the table. "No serious talk until after breakfast. That's my rule." Adam, for Olivia couldn't help but think of him by his given name, now smiled slightly at their hostess's firm tone. "Yes, madam." The meal passed in relatively comfortable silence, though Olivia could feel the weight of unspoken words. When the plates were cleared and Mrs. Holloway had poured everyone coffee, Adam finally broached the subject they'd all been avoiding. "I've been thinking about your situation," he said, his gaze steady on Olivia. "Your brother came into town early this morning looking for you both." Eleanor gasped softly and Olivia's hands tightened around her coffee cup. "What did he say?" she asked. "He demanded I return you to his custody," Adam replied. "Said it was a family matter and the law had no right to interfere." "And what did you tell him?" Olivia's heart was pounding again, her mouth suddenly dry despite the coffee. Adam's expression remained calm. "I told him that I had reason to believe you were in danger in his home, and that until I was satisfied you'd be safe, you'd remain under the protection of the law." "He didn't take that well, I imagine," Mrs. Holloway remarked dryly. "No, madam, he did not." Adam's mouth quirked in a humorless smile. "Made quite a scene at the marshal's office. Marshal Tanner backed me up, though." "Your brother stormed off, saying he'd take it up with Judge Wilson when he comes through next week." Olivia's heart sank. Judge Wilson was a friend of Jeremiah's, often sharing whiskey with him at the saloon when court business brought him to Redemption Creek. "The judge will side with him." "Perhaps," Adam conceded, "but that gives us a week to consider alternatives." "What alternatives?" Eleanor asked, hope coloring her voice for the first time. "We have no money, no property of our own. Everything belongs to Jeremiah." "That's not entirely true," Olivia said slowly, an idea forming. "Mother's jewelry. Father always said it would be our dowry. Jeremiah can't claim it's his." Adam nodded thoughtfully. "That's a start, and there's work to be found in town for young women with skills." "Do either of you have any training?" "I can sew quite well," Olivia replied. "And Eleanor has a gift with numbers. Our father made sure we received a proper education." "Mrs. Larson at the dress shop mentioned needing help," Mrs. Holloway offered. "And I believe Mr. Peterson at the bank was looking for someone to assist with the ledgers." Hope, fragile but persistent, began to bloom in Olivia's chest. "If we could earn our own way, perhaps rent rooms somewhere." "You're welcome to stay here as long as needed," Mrs. Holloway said firmly. "My house has stood empty since my boys moved out west, too quiet for my liking." "That's very generous," Olivia said, touched by the woman's kindness, "but we couldn't impose indefinitely." "It's not imposing if you're paying board," Mrs. Holloway countered. "Once you find work." Adam set his empty coffee cup down. "I have to make my rounds, but I'll speak with Mrs. Larson and Mr. Peterson today. In the meantime, it might be best if you ladies remained here out of sight." "Hiding won't solve anything," Olivia said, straightening her shoulders. "If we're to build new lives here, we need to face the town openly. I won't skulk about as though we've done something wrong." A hint of admiration flickered in Adam's eyes. "You're braver than most, Miss Owens." "Not brave," she corrected him. "Just tired of living in fear." He nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But perhaps wait until I've had a chance to speak with a few folks in town. Your brother has friends here, people who might make things difficult if they think you're challenging his authority." Deputy Quinn is right, Mrs. Holloway said. Give it a day for the gossip to settle. I'll fetch your things from the farm while the deputy makes his inquiries. Jeremiah won't just hand over our belongings, Eleanor pointed out. He will if I accompany Mrs. Holloway, Adam said firmly. I'll make sure of it. After finalizing their plans, Adam took his leave, promising to return by evening with news. As Mrs. Holloway prepared to visit the farm with him, Olivia found herself standing alone with the deputy on the front porch of the boarding house. "Why are you helping us?" she asked suddenly, the question that had been burning in her mind since he'd appeared in their kitchen doorway the previous evening. "You don't know us. We're nothing to you." Adam was silent for a long moment, his gaze directed at the dusty street but seeming to see something much farther away. "I had a sister once," he finally said, his voice low. "Caroline. She married a man who seemed decent enough at first. By the time we realized what he was doing to her behind closed doors, it was too late." His jaw tightened. "I swore I'd never stand by again if I saw a woman in danger." The simple, painful honesty of his answer caught Olivia off guard. "I'm sorry about your sister." He nodded once sharply, then seemed to shake off the memory. "Stay safe today, Miss Owens. I'll return as soon as I can." As she watched him walk away, Olivia felt something shift inside her, a subtle realignment of her world, as though the axis upon which her life spun had tilted slightly, changing her perspective entirely. For 3 years, she'd believed herself alone, responsible only for protecting Eleanor from the worst of Jeremiah's temper. Now, unexpectedly, there was someone else standing beside them in their fight. Whether Deputy Adam Quinn's assistance would be enough to free them from Jeremiah's control remained to be seen. But for the first time in years, Olivia allowed herself to hope. The day passed slowly, with Olivia and Eleanor helping Mrs. Holloway around the boarding house to distract themselves from worry. By mid-afternoon, Mrs. Holloway returned from the farm with Adam, their wagon loaded with the sisters' trunks and personal belongings. "Your brother was uncooperative at first," Mrs. Holloway explained as they unloaded the wagon. "But the deputy has quite a persuasive way about him." Adam's knuckles were scraped raw, Olivia noticed, though he made no mention of any confrontation. She wondered what had transpired at the farm but didn't ask, simply grateful to have their possessions, particularly the small wooden box containing their mother's jewelry, which Eleanor clutched tightly to her chest. That evening, after a satisfying supper, Adam shared the results of his inquiries around town. "Mrs. Larson is willing to meet with you tomorrow, Miss Olivia. She needs help with sewing and alterations, especially with the miners' wives ordering new dresses for the Founders' Day celebration next month." Olivia nodded, pleased. "And for Eleanor, Mr. Peterson is interested in her mathematical abilities but wants to speak with her directly." "He's a cautious man." "Stingy, you mean," Mrs. Holloway interjected with a sniff. "Wants to make sure he's getting his money's worth before committing to wages." "Either way, it's a start," Adam continued. "If you both secure positions, you'll have income of your own. That's the first step toward independence." "And what about Jeremiah?" Eleanor asked, the question they'd all been avoiding. When Judge Wilson arrives, Adam's expression grew serious. "I spoke with Marshal Tanner at length today. He agrees that we need more than just my word against your brothers. If you're willing, Miss Olivia, Miss Eleanor, we need you to make formal statements about how your brother has treated you." Olivia exchanged a glance with Eleanor, seeing her own apprehension reflected in her sister's eyes. Speaking out publicly against Jeremiah would scandalize the town. Women simply didn't air family grievances that way. "People will talk," Olivia said quietly. "They might not believe us. Some won't," Adam acknowledged, "but others will." and those statements give the law something to stand on when Judge Wilson arrives. After a moment's hesitation, Olivia nodded. "We'll do it. Tomorrow, after our meetings about employment." Adam seemed satisfied with this plan. As he prepared to leave for the evening, Olivia followed him onto the porch, drawn by an impulse she couldn't quite name. "Your hand," she said, gesturing to his injured knuckles. "What happened at the farm?" Adam glanced down at his hand as though noticing the injury for the first time. "Your brother objected to us taking your things. Words were exchanged, then something besides words. You fought him." He threw the first punch. Adam's tone was matter-of-fact. "I threw the last one." Despite everything, Olivia felt a surprising surge of satisfaction at the image. "Thank you. Not just for that, but for everything you're doing." He studied her face in the fading light. "You don't need to thank me, Miss Owens. I'm just doing what's right." "Olivia," she corrected him. "Please call me Olivia. After all you've done, formalities seem unnecessary." A small smile touched his lips. "Olivia, then." The way he said her name, with a gentle emphasis on the second syllable, sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to her with such simple respect and dignity. "Good night, Adam," she said softly. "Good night, Olivia." He touched the brim of his hat and turned to go, but paused after a few steps. "You're doing the right thing, you know, standing up for yourself and your sister. It takes courage." Before she could respond, he continued down the path, disappearing into the gathering darkness. Olivia remained on the porch for a long moment afterward, her thoughts a confused jumble of fear, hope, and a new, unfamiliar feeling she wasn't quite ready to name. The next morning dawned clear and hot, typical for July in the Arizona Territory. Olivia dressed carefully for her meeting with Mrs. Larson, choosing her best dress, a simple blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes, and arranging her chestnut hair in a neat chignon. Eleanor, similarly attired in her finest green dress, fidgeted nervously as they prepared to venture into town. "What if Jeremiah is waiting for us?" she whispered, glancing anxiously toward the window. "What if he tries to drag us home by force?" "He won't," Olivia assured her with more confidence than she truly felt. "Not in broad daylight, not with Deputy Quinn watching out for us." As if summoned by her words, there was a knock at the front door, and moments later, Mrs. Holloway called them downstairs. Adam stood in the entryway, his badge gleaming on his chest and his expression composed. "I thought I might escort you ladies to your appointments," he said, his tone casual though his eyes were watchful. "Considering the circumstances." Relief washed over Olivia. "That would be most appreciated, Deputy." The walk into the heart of town was both uncomfortable and illuminating. People they'd known all their lives watched their progress with undisguised curiosity, some nodding in greeting, others turning away with disapproving frowns. Word of their departure from the farm and the circumstances surrounding it had clearly spread through Redemption Creek's efficient gossip network. "Ignore them," Adam murmured, noticing Olivia's stiff posture. "Small towns feed on scandal. They'll find something new to talk about soon enough." "It's not the talk I mind," she replied quietly. "It's knowing that some of these people saw the bruises over the years and said nothing, did nothing." Adam's expression darkened. "That's why what you're doing matters, breaking the silence." They reached the dress shop first, where Mrs. Larson, a stern-faced woman with nimble fingers and a reputation for exacting standards, awaited them. After a brief, professional interview during which Olivia demonstrated her stitching abilities, Mrs. Larson offered her a position on the spot. $3 a week to start, the dressmaker said. "More if you prove yourself capable of the finer work. Hours are 8 till 6 half-day on Saturdays." She paused, then added with unusual gentleness, And you'll work in the back room, away from curious eyes, until this business with your brother settles down." Gratitude welled up in Olivia's chest. "Thank you, Mrs. Larson. I won't disappoint you. See that you don't." The older woman's tone was brisk, but there was a glint of kindness in her eyes. "Start tomorrow." Eleanor's meeting with Mr. Peterson at the bank proved equally successful, though the banker was more verbose in his conditions and less generous with his initial offer of wages. Nevertheless, by midday, both sisters had secured employment, the first step toward independence. "This calls for a celebration," Adam declared as they exited the bank. "How about lunch at the hotel dining room? My treat." Eleanor's eyes widened. "Is that proper?" Adam smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his serious face. "I think we can risk a minor scandal in light of your employment success. Besides, I'm a deputy marshal escorting 2 young ladies under the protection of the law. Perfectly proper." The hotel dining room was the most respectable establishment in Redemption Creek, catering to travelers and the town's upper echelon. As they settled at a table near the window, Olivia was acutely aware of the stares directed their way, some curious, some disapproving. "Mrs. Johnson looks like she swallowed a lemon," Eleanor whispered, glancing toward a table where the banker's wife sat with several other well-dressed women. "Let her look," Olivia replied, straightening her shoulders. "We've done nothing wrong." Their meal was simple but delicious: roast chicken, fresh vegetables from the hotel garden, and apple pie for dessert. Throughout the meal, Adam kept the conversation light, sharing amusing anecdotes about his experiences as a lawman in various frontier towns, and asking the sisters about their interests beyond their new employment. It was the most normal, pleasant interaction Olivia had experienced in years, and she found herself relaxing as the meal progressed, even laughing at Adam's dry observations about some of Redemption Creek's more eccentric citizens. "You have a beautiful laugh," he said suddenly, catching her off guard. "You should use it more often." Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I haven't had much cause for laughter recently." "Then we'll have to change that," he replied simply. The moment was interrupted by the dining room door banging open with enough force to rattle the glassware on their table. Jeremiah Owens stood in the doorway, his face flushed with anger or whiskey or both, his gaze fixing immediately on their table. "There you are," he snarled, striding toward them, "making a spectacle of yourselves as if you haven't brought enough shame on our family name." Eleanor shrank back in her chair, but Olivia forced herself to remain steady, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. Adam rose smoothly to his feet, positioning himself between the sisters and their approaching brother. "Mr. Owens," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the suddenly silent dining room, "I suggest you leave now before you create a scene you'll regret." Jeremiah stopped a few feet from their table, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. A purpling bruise marred his left cheekbone, evidence, Olivia presumed, of his altercation with Adam the previous day. "These are my sisters," he said, loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "They belong at home, not parading around town with a man of questionable character." Adam didn't rise to the bait. "Miss Owens and Miss Eleanor have secured respectable employment in town and are currently under the protection of the law. If you have concerns about their welfare, you can address them through proper channels when Judge Wilson arrives." Jeremiah's gaze shifted to Olivia, his eyes narrowing with malice. "You always were too headstrong for your own good, just like Mother. Look where it got her, dead and buried while Father was away, because she wouldn't listen to reason." The cruel words struck Olivia like a physical blow. Their mother had died trying to save livestock during a sudden storm, against Jeremiah's advice to leave them. He'd blamed her stubbornness for her death ever since, using it as a weapon against Olivia whenever she showed similar independence. "That's enough," Adam said, his voice hardening. "Leave now, Mr. Owens, or I'll remove you myself." For a tense moment, Olivia thought Jeremiah might physically attack the deputy. Then, with a final venomous look at his sisters, he spat on the floor and turned on his heel. "This isn't over," he called over his shoulder as he stormed out. "Not by a long shot." In the awkward silence that followed his departure, Olivia became painfully aware of the stares from the other diners. Some looked shocked, others judgmental, a few openly curious. She felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that made her want to flee. Adam reclaimed his seat, his expression composed though tension radiated from his posture. "I apologize for that interruption, ladies. Please finish your pie." Eleanor pushed her plate away, her appetite clearly gone. "Everyone's staring at us." "Let them," Adam replied calmly, though his eyes remained alert, scanning the room. "You have nothing to be ashamed of." Olivia appreciated his support, but the confrontation had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. Jeremiah's hatred had been palpable, and she knew her brother well enough to recognize that he wouldn't give up easily. The fragile sense of security she'd been building crumbled slightly under the weight of that knowledge. As they finished their meal in subdued silence and prepared to leave, Adam placed a reassuring hand briefly on Olivia's arm. "Don't let him get to you. That's what he wants." "I know," she replied, mustering a small smile, "but knowing doesn't always make it easier." The rest of the day passed without further incident. Adam escorted them to the marshal's office, where they gave their formal statements about Jeremiah's treatment, a difficult, emotionally draining process that left both sisters exhausted. Marshal Tanner, a gruff but fair-minded man in his 50s, listened without interruption, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts as he recorded their testimony. "This will help when Judge Wilson arrives," he assured them when they'd finished. "Deputy Quinn was right to intervene. No woman should have to endure such treatment, family or no." By the time they returned to Mrs. Holloway's boarding house, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the dusty street. Olivia felt drained, as though she'd run for miles, but there was also a curious sense of liberation. The truth had been spoken, recorded, made official. Whatever happened next, there would be no returning to the silence and fear that had defined the past 3 years. As Eleanor went upstairs to rest before supper, Olivia lingered in the parlor with Adam, who seemed reluctant to leave despite having fulfilled his duties for the day. "Will you be all right?" he asked, studying her face with concern. "Today was difficult." "It was," she acknowledged. "But necessary. Thank you for standing by us through it." He nodded, his gaze dropping briefly to his hat, which he held in his hands. "I wanted to ask. That is, I wondered if you might." He paused, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. "The town is holding a social on Saturday evening after the Founders' Day parade. I thought, perhaps, if you felt up to it, you might allow me to escort you." The invitation caught Olivia by surprise. Amid all the turmoil and uncertainty, the notion of attending a social event seemed almost absurd. Yet there was something appealing about the normalcy of it, a chance to be simply a young woman being courted, rather than a victim seeking justice. "I'd like that," she said softly. "If you're certain you want to be seen with someone causing so much scandal in town." A smile touched his lips. "I can't think of anyone I'd rather escort." The warmth in his eyes caused a flutter in Olivia's chest that had nothing to do with anxiety or fear. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, something unspoken passing between them. "I should go," Adam said finally, settling his hat on his head. "Get some rest, Olivia. Tomorrow will be your first day of truly independent work." As she watched him leave, Olivia reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in just 2 days. From the prison of her brother's farm to employment, shelter, and now the prospect of attending the social with a man who had shown her nothing but respect and kindness. It was almost too much to hope that such good fortune could continue. Experience had taught her that happiness was fleeting, especially for women with limited means and power. Yet as she climbed the stairs to join Eleanor, Olivia allowed herself to nurture the small flame of hope that had begun to burn in her heart. Perhaps, just perhaps, they could build a new life here, one free from fear and full of possibilities she had long since stopped imagining. The following days fell into a pattern that was both novel and reassuring. Each morning, Olivia walked to Mrs. Larson's dress shop while Eleanor made her way to the bank, both accompanied by either Adam or one of the other deputies Marshal Tanner had assigned to ensure their safety. They worked diligently at their new positions, returning to Mrs. Holloway's boarding house in the evenings tired but satisfied with their independence. Jeremiah made no further public scenes, though Olivia occasionally caught glimpses of him watching from a distance as she moved about town. The intensity of his gaze unsettled her, but she refused to let him intimidate her into returning to the shadows. By Saturday, 5 days after their departure from the farm, Olivia had almost begun to believe that their new arrangement might become permanent. Judge Wilson was due to arrive the following Wednesday, and while that prospect still filled her with apprehension, the statements they'd provided to Marshal Tanner offered some protection. As she prepared for the social that evening, Olivia took special care with her appearance. She wore her best dress, a pale yellow muslin with delicate embroidery around the collar that she'd altered slightly to better fit her slender frame. Eleanor helped her arrange her hair in a more elaborate style than usual, with soft curls framing her face. "You look beautiful," Eleanor said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "Deputy Quinn won't be able to take his eyes off you." Olivia blushed. "Don't be silly, he's just being kind, offering to escort me." "Is that what you think?" Eleanor raised an eyebrow skeptically. "I've seen the way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. That's not kindness, Livy. It's something else entirely." Before Olivia could formulate a response, Mrs. Holloway called up the stairs. "Deputy Quinn is here, dear." Taking a deep breath to steady her suddenly racing heart, Olivia descended to find Adam waiting in the parlor. He was dressed more formally than she'd seen him before, in a clean dark suit with a crisp white shirt, his badge polished to a high shine. He'd clearly visited the barber, his dark hair neatly trimmed and his jaw cleanly shaven. The transformation was striking. Without the stubble and dust of his daily rounds, Adam Quinn looked younger, though no less imposing. His gray eyes widened slightly as she entered the room, a reaction that sent a pleasant warmth through her. "Miss Owens," he said, his voice a touch deeper than usual. "You look beautiful." The simple compliment, delivered with such evident sincerity, brought heat to her cheeks. "Thank you, Deputy. You clean up quite well yourself." Mrs. Holloway bustled about, insisting on taking a daguerreotype of them with her new camera before they departed. "For posterity," she insisted, though Olivia suspected the woman had more matchmaking in mind than record-keeping. As they walked toward the town square where the social was being held, Olivia was acutely aware of Adam's presence beside her. He'd offered his arm, and the solid warmth of him through his suit jacket was both reassuring and distracting. "Are you nervous?" he asked as they approached the gathering, where lanterns hung from trees and a small band was setting up near a wooden dance floor constructed for the occasion. "A little," she admitted. "I haven't attended a social since before my parents died." Jeremiah didn't approve of such frivolity. Adam's expression darkened momentarily at the mention of her brother, but he quickly recovered his smile. "Then we'll have to make up for lost time. I should warn you, though I'm not much of a dancer." Olivia laughed. "That makes two of us. We can be awkward together." The social was in full swing by the time they arrived. Nearly everyone in Redemption Creek had turned out for the occasion, dressed in their finest clothes and eager for the rare opportunity to enjoy music, dancing, and refreshments. Olivia felt the weight of curious stares as they joined the crowd, but Adam's steady presence beside her made them easier to bear. To her surprise, several people approached to greet them warmly. Mrs. Larson introduced them to her husband, a quiet man who nodded approvingly when his wife praised Olivia's sewing skills. Mr. Peterson did the same with Eleanor, who had accompanied them with Mrs. Holloway as her chaperone. Even Marshal Tanner made a point of stopping by, tipping his hat to Olivia with a gruff, "Evening, Miss Owens. Good to see you enjoying yourself." As the band struck up a lively tune, Adam turned to Olivia with a questioning look. "Would you care to dance?" "Despite my earlier warning about my abilities." "I'd be delighted," she replied, placing her hand in his outstretched one. His earlier disclaimer about his dancing skills proved somewhat exaggerated. While not graceful, Adam moved with the same quiet confidence he displayed in everything else, guiding her through the steps of the simple country dance with minimal missteps. "You're better at this than you claimed," Olivia remarked as they circled each other, following the pattern of the dance. "I have excellent motivation to avoid embarrassing myself," he replied with a smile that made her heart skip. As the evening progressed, Olivia found herself genuinely enjoying the festivities. They danced several more times, sampled the refreshments provided by the town's ladies' auxiliary, and conversed easily with various townspeople who seemed increasingly accepting of the sisters' presence. During a pause between dances, as they stood at the edge of the gathering catching their breath, Adam's expression grew more serious. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I received a telegram from an old colleague in Santa Fe yesterday. He's a lawyer who specializes in family matters." Olivia's pulse quickened. "What did he say?" "He believes there might be legal grounds to challenge your brother's guardianship, given your age and the documented mistreatment." Adam's eyes held her steadily. "It wouldn't be easy, and Judge Wilson might not be sympathetic, but there's a chance." Hope, that dangerous emotion Olivia had been trying to temper, surged within her. "Truly?" Adam nodded. "My friend is willing to come to Redemption Creek to represent you and Eleanor if you want to pursue it." "Yes," Olivia said without hesitation. "Whatever it costs, whatever it takes." "Good." Adam smiled, clearly pleased by her determination. "I'll send a response tomorrow." The moment was interrupted by a commotion at the edge of the square. Heads turned toward the disturbance, and Olivia's stomach dropped as she recognized her brother's voice, raised in anger. Jeremiah stood swaying slightly at the perimeter of the social, clearly intoxicated and flanked by two equally inebriated companions, the Miller brothers, whose influence had worsened his drinking and violent tendencies over the past year. "There she is," Jeremiah slurred, pointing directly at Olivia. "My ungrateful sister dressed up like a lady when she's nothing but a—" "That's enough, Owens," Marshal Tanner intervened, moving quickly to intercept the trio before Jeremiah could finish his insult. "You're drunk. Go home and sleep it off." "This is a public gathering," Jeremiah argued, his words running together slightly. "I have every right to be here." "Not in this condition, you don't." The marshal's tone left no room for argument. "Now go peacefully, or I'll have you spend the night in a cell." Adam had positioned himself protectively in front of Olivia, his posture tense and alert. Across the square, she could see Eleanor looking frightened, with Mrs. Holloway's arm around her shoulders. For a moment, it seemed Jeremiah might challenge the marshal's authority. Then, with a final venomous glare in Olivia's direction, he spat on the ground and turned away, the Miller brothers following unsteadily behind him. "I'm sorry about that," Adam said quietly as the music hesitantly resumed and people returned to their conversations, though with less enthusiasm than before. "I should have anticipated he might show up." "It's not your fault," Olivia assured him, though she couldn't quite suppress the tremor in her voice. "Jeremiah has always known exactly how to cause the maximum embarrassment." Adam studied her face. "Would you like to leave? I'd understand if you've had enough for one evening." Olivia considered the offer, tempted to retreat to the safety of Mrs. Holloway's boarding house. Then, with a surge of defiance, she shook her head. "No, I won't let him ruin this evening, not when I was enjoying myself for the first time in years." Admiration flickered in Adam's eyes. "You're a remarkable woman, Olivia Owens." The simple statement, delivered with such evident sincerity, warmed her from within. "Dance with me again," she asked, extending her hand. As they rejoined the dancers, Olivia made a conscious decision to focus on the present moment: the music, the warm summer air, the solid presence of Adam beside her, rather than the lingering threat of her brother's hatred or the uncertain outcome of Judge Wilson's arrival. For tonight, at least, she would allow herself to experience joy without reservation. Later, as the social wound down and they began the walk back to Mrs. Holloway's, Adam kept Olivia's hand tucked securely in the crook of his arm. Eleanor and Mrs. Holloway walked a few paces ahead, giving them a modicum of privacy while still maintaining propriety. "Despite the interruption, I hope you enjoyed yourself this evening," Adam said. "I did," Olivia replied honestly. "More than I expected to. Thank you for inviting me." "The pleasure was entirely mine." There was a warmth in his voice that made her glance up at him, finding his gaze already on her face. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Olivia had never experienced the kind of courtship other young women her age took for granted. Jeremiah's control had seen to that. But she recognized the intent in Adam's expression and felt an answering response within herself that both thrilled and frightened her. "Olivia," he began, his voice lower, "I know we haven't known each other long and your situation is complicated, but I want you to know whatever he intended to say was cut short by the sudden appearance of a figure stepping out from between two buildings ahead of them." Jeremiah stood in their path, his posture unsteady but his expression coldly sober. "Evening, Deputy," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "Enjoying your time with my sister. Must be nice having a woman so. Grateful for your protection." The insinuation was clear and deliberately cruel. Olivia felt as though she'd been doused with ice water, shame and anger warring within her. Adam's posture shifted instantly, one hand moving to rest near his holstered weapon while the other gently moved Olivia slightly behind him. "You're still drunk, Mr. Owens. Go home before you do something you'll regret." "I'm just having a friendly conversation," Jeremiah replied, his gaze fixed malevolently on Olivia. "Wanted to let my dear sister know that I received word today. Judge Wilson will be arriving early Monday instead of Wednesday. Seems he's eager to resolve this situation." Olivia's heart sank. 2 fewer days to prepare, 2 fewer days to secure the lawyer Adam had mentioned. "Then we'll be ready on Monday," Adam replied steadily. "Now step aside." Jeremiah smiled, an expression devoid of warmth. "Always so commanding, Deputy. I wonder if my sister finds that attractive. She always did have questionable judgment when it came to men." "That's enough," Olivia said sharply, stepping forward despite Adam's protective stance. Say what you want about me, Jeremiah, but we both know the truth. You've made our lives a living hell since Mother and Father died. No judge who hears the full story will allow you to continue. Her brother's face darkened with rage. You ungrateful little, careful, Adam warned, his hand now openly resting on his holstered pistol. Choose your next words very carefully, Mr. Owens. For a tense moment, Olivia thought her brother might physically attack them. Then, with a final venomous glare, he stepped aside. Monday, he repeated as they passed. We'll see who Judge Wilson believes a respected property owner or a couple of rebellious girls and their protector. The encounter cast a shadow over what had been a pleasant evening. As they continued toward the boarding house, Olivia felt the weight of anxiety settling back onto her shoulders. Don't let him get to you, Adam said quietly when they were safely out of Jeremiah's earshot. That's exactly what he wants. I know, Olivia replied, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. But he's right about one thing: Judge Wilson's early arrival complicates matters. Will your lawyer friend be able to get here in time? Adam's expression was determined. I'll send a telegram first thing in the morning. If necessary, I'll ride to meet him halfway. At the boarding house, Mrs. Holloway and Eleanor went inside after bidding Adam good night, leaving Olivia alone with him on the porch for a moment. I'm sorry about the interruption, she said. Before Jeremiah appeared, you were about to say something. Adam hesitated, then shook his head slightly. It can wait. There are more pressing matters to attend to now. Though disappointed, Olivia nodded in understanding. Thank you again for tonight. Despite everything, I'm glad we went. As am I. He took her hand, his thumb brushing gently across her knuckles in a gesture that sent warmth cascading through her. Get some rest, Olivia. Tomorrow we prepare for Judge Wilson. As she watched him walk away, Olivia was struck by the realization that in just 1 week, Adam Quinn had become central to her hopes for the future, not just as an ally in her fight for independence, but as something more personal, more profound. The recognition was both exhilarating and terrifying. Whatever feelings might be growing between them would have to wait. First, they had to secure her and Eleanor's freedom from Jeremiah's control. Only then could she allow herself to explore the possibilities that Adam's presence in her life had awakened. Sunday passed in a blur of preparation. Adam sent an urgent telegram to his lawyer friend in Santa Fe, explaining the changed circumstances and requesting his immediate presence in Redemption Creek. By afternoon, he'd received a response. The lawyer, James Harrington, had already departed upon receiving Adam's earlier message and should arrive by Monday afternoon, possibly too late for the initial hearing with Judge Wilson, but in time to appeal any unfavorable ruling. It's not ideal, Adam explained as he shared this news with Olivia, Eleanor, and Marshal Tanner in the boarding house parlor, but at least he'll be here. In the meantime, we need to present the strongest possible case ourselves. The marshal nodded grimly. I've prepared the statements you both gave, along with my own observations of Jeremiah's behavior. Judge Wilson's a stickler for the law, but he's not unreasonable. He's also Jeremiah's friend, Olivia pointed out, trying to keep the despair from her voice. They drink together whenever he's in town. That may be, Marshal Tanner acknowledged, but Wilson takes his judicial responsibilities seriously. If we present compelling evidence, he'll have to consider it, friendship or no. The remainder of the day was spent reviewing their testimony, gathering character references from Mrs. Larson and Mr. Peterson regarding their new employment, and preparing for every possible challenge Jeremiah might raise. By the time Adam left that evening, Olivia felt simultaneously exhausted and wired with nervous energy. Sleep proved elusive, her mind cycling through scenarios, rehearsing arguments, imagining outcomes both favorable and disastrous. Monday morning dawned clear and hot, the sun already blazing as Olivia dressed for the hearing. She chose her most conservative dress, a navy blue cotton with a high collar and long sleeves, and pinned her hair in a simple, modest style. Eleanor, similarly attired in somber colors, looked pale but determined as they shared a quiet breakfast with Mrs. Holloway. "Whatever happens today," Olivia told her sister as they prepared to leave, "remember that we've already won a kind of victory. We've spoken the truth. We've stood up for ourselves. That can't be taken away no matter what Judge Wilson decides." Eleanor squeezed her hand. "I'm scared, Livy. What if he sends us back to the farm?" "Then we'll find another way," Olivia promised, though her own heart quailed at the prospect. "But let's not borrow trouble. One step at a time." Adam and Marshal Tanner arrived to escort them to the courthouse, both men wearing their formal uniforms and looking grimly professional. The courthouse itself was a modest building on the main street, recently constructed as Redemption Creek had grown from a mining camp to a proper town. Today, it seemed to Olivia like a fortress she had to breach, imposing and forbidding despite its simple architecture. Judge Wilson had already arrived, holding court in the main chamber. A small crowd had gathered to witness the proceedings, some out of genuine concern, others merely seeking entertainment in the form of scandal. Olivia held her head high as she walked down the central aisle, aware of the whispers that followed their progress. Jeremiah sat at the front of the room, dressed in his Sunday best and looking far more respectable than he had at the social. Beside him sat the town's only lawyer, Mr. Daniels, a thin, austere man known for his conservative views regarding family matters. Seeing that her brother had secured legal representation increased Olivia's anxiety, but she forced herself to maintain a composed expression. Judge Wilson, a portly man in his 60s with mutton-chop whiskers and piercing blue eyes, called the court to order with a sharp rap of his gavel. After explaining the nature of the hearing, to determine the validity of Deputy Quinn's removal of the Owens sisters from their brother's custody, he invited Mr. Daniels to present Jeremiah's case first. The lawyer rose, straightening his vest importantly. "Your Honor, this is a simple matter of family authority being usurped by an overzealous deputy marshal. Mr. Jeremiah Owens is the legal guardian of his sisters, appointed by this very court upon their parents' deaths 3 years ago. He has provided them with shelter, food, and all necessities, fulfilling his duties admirably despite the financial hardships of running the family farm alone." Mr. Daniels paced slightly as he continued. "Deputy Quinn, relatively new to our community and unfamiliar with its values, took it upon himself to interfere in a private family matter. He removed these young women from their home based solely on his personal judgment, without proper legal authority. Mr. Owens merely sought to discipline his sister for disrespectful behavior, as is his right and duty as her guardian when the deputy intruded." Olivia clenched her jaw at this mischaracterization, but remained silent, knowing her turn would come. "Furthermore," Mr. Daniels concluded, "these young women have been living in a highly irregular situation, boarding with a widow of limited means, working jobs that expose them to all manner of unsuitable influences, and in the case of Miss Olivia Owens, being escorted about town by the very deputy who removed her from her brother's protection, raising questions about his motivations in this matter." The insinuation caused a murmur among the spectators. Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks, but Adam's expression remained impassive beside her. Judge Wilson nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you, Mr. Daniels." Now, Marshal Tanner, as Deputy Quinn, is directly involved in this case. Perhaps you should present the opposing view." The marshal rose, his weathered face serious. "Your Honor, this is indeed a matter of family authority, but specifically, the abuse of that authority." Deputy Quinn intervened when he witnessed Mr. Owens about to physically assault Miss Olivia Owens with a belt. This was not a case of reasonable discipline, but of violent rage that placed Miss Owens in immediate danger. He presented the written statements Olivia and Eleanor had provided, along with his own observations of Jeremiah's subsequent behavior. Furthermore, both young women have given consistent accounts of ongoing mistreatment, physical, emotional, and financial, at their brother's hands since he became their guardian. They have secured respectable employment in town and arranged proper lodging with a respectable widow. Their conduct has been beyond reproach. Judge Wilson accepted the documents, reviewing them with a furrowed brow before looking up at Olivia. "Miss Owens, do you wish to speak on your own behalf?" Olivia rose, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "Yes, Your Honor. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity." Taking a deep breath, she recounted the past 3 years under Jeremiah's guardianship, the escalating violence, the isolation, the control over every aspect of their lives. She described specific incidents, dates, witnesses when available, and the gradual deterioration of her brother's behavior, particularly after he began associating with certain unsavory elements in town. "I don't speak out of malice toward my brother," she concluded, "but out of necessity. Eleanor and I have established ourselves independently in town, with respectable employment and lodging. We ask only to be allowed to continue this arrangement, free from Jeremiah's control and the threat of violence that accompanies it." Judge Wilson's expression remained inscrutable throughout her testimony. When Eleanor added her corroboration in a softer but equally determined voice, he listened attentively, occasionally making notes. Finally, he turned to Jeremiah. "Mr. Owens, what do you have to say to these serious allegations?" Jeremiah rose, the picture of wounded dignity. "Your Honor, I'm deeply hurt by my sister's false accusations. Yes, I have enforced discipline in our home as our father did before me, as any responsible guardian must. Perhaps I've been stricter than some might approve, but never abusive." His voice took on a note of regret. "Since our parents' deaths, I've sacrificed everything to keep the family farm running, to provide for my sisters, to ensure they were raised properly. The farm has struggled as many have in recent years, and I've had to make difficult decisions. Perhaps this has caused resentment." He shook his head sorrowfully. "As for the specific incident," Deputy Quinn interrupted, "I admit I lost my temper when Olivia directly defied me regarding Eleanor's potential marriage, a beneficial arrangement I'd worked hard to secure. I was about to discipline her, yes, but not to beat her as they claim." Judge Wilson considered this, then addressed the entire gathering. "I've heard the arguments presented today, and this is clearly a complex situation requiring careful consideration. Before rendering my decision, I'd like to speak privately with each party." He glanced at the clock on the wall. "We'll take a brief recess, and I'll see Miss Olivia Owens in my chambers first." As the judge left the courtroom, Olivia exchanged worried glances with Adam. "What does this mean?" she whispered. "It's a good sign," he assured her. "He wants to hear you speak freely, without the pressure of the public or your brother's presence." In Judge Wilson's chambers, a small, austere room with law books lining the walls, Olivia found herself seated across from the judge, who studied her with penetrating eyes. "Miss Owens," he began without preamble, "I've known your family for many years. Your father was a good man, respected in this community. What would he say about these proceedings, do you think? The question caught Olivia off guard. After a moment's reflection, she replied honestly, "I believe he would be heartbroken that it came to this, Your Honor, but I also believe he would want us to be safe and treated with dignity. He raised us to be independent thinkers, not silent sufferers." Judge Wilson nodded slowly. "And your relationship with Deputy Quinn, there's been some implication of impropriety. What is the nature of your association?" Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks, but met the judge's gaze directly. "Deputy Quinn intervened when I was in danger. He has since ensured our safety and helped us establish ourselves independently in town. He escorted me to the Founders' Day social, yes, but with full propriety and Mrs. Holloway as chaperone. There has been nothing inappropriate in our interactions." "But you care for him," the judge observed shrewdly. "That much is evident." "I admire him greatly," Olivia admitted, seeing no point in denial. "He has shown courage and integrity in a situation where many others looked away. But my request to be released from my brother's guardianship stands on its own merits, regardless of any personal feelings." Judge Wilson seemed satisfied with this answer. After a few more questions about her employment, living arrangements, and plans for the future, he dismissed her and called Eleanor in next. One by one, he interviewed Adam, Marshal Tanner, and finally Jeremiah himself. When court reconvened an hour later, tension filled the room as Judge Wilson took his seat and surveyed the gathering with a grave expression. "Having heard testimony from all parties and considered the evidence presented," he began, "I find myself faced with a difficult decision. The law generally presumes that family authority should be maintained, particularly in the case of unmarried women. However, the law also exists to protect all citizens from harm." He turned his attention to Jeremiah. "Mr. Owens, while I acknowledge the challenges you've faced in maintaining the family farm and raising your sisters after your parents' untimely deaths, the evidence suggests you have exceeded reasonable authority in your treatment of them. The testimonies provided are consistent and troubling." Jeremiah began to protest, but Judge Wilson silenced him with a raised hand. "I am not finished, sir." Turning to Olivia and Eleanor, he continued, "Young ladies, you have demonstrated admirable initiative in securing employment and proper lodging. Your conduct appears to be above reproach." Olivia held her breath as the judge prepared to deliver his ruling. "Therefore, it is the decision of this court that Mrs. Olivia and Eleanor Owens shall remain independent of their brother's guardianship, provided they maintain their current employment and respectable living arrangements. Mr. Jeremiah Owens is hereby ordered to relinquish any claim of authority over his sisters and to maintain a distance of at least 50 yards from them at all times, except in public gatherings where such distance is impractical, in which case he is to avoid all interaction." Relief washed over Olivia in a dizzying wave. Beside her, Eleanor squeezed her hand so tightly it hurt, but Olivia welcomed the pain as confirmation that this was real, not a dream from which she would awaken. Judge Wilson wasn't finished, however. "Additionally, Mr. Owens is ordered to release to his sisters any personal property belonging to them, including items inherited from their parents. This court will appoint an independent trustee to oversee the division of family assets, including any funds or property specifically designated for the young ladies in their parents' will." Jeremiah's face had darkened with each word, his hands gripping the table before him with white-knuckled intensity. "This is an outrage," he snarled, rising to his feet. "You're taking the word of hysterical women over a property owner and taxpayer." "Sit down, Mr. Owens," Judge Wilson ordered sharply. Your behavior in this courtroom only lends credence to your sister's claims about your temperament. One more outburst, and I'll hold you in contempt." With visible effort, Jeremiah controlled himself, though hatred burned in his eyes as he glared at Olivia. "This ruling takes immediate effect," the judge concluded, bringing down his gavel with finality. "Court is adjourned." The courtroom erupted in murmurs and movement. Olivia sat momentarily stunned, unable to fully process that they had won, that they were truly free of Jeremiah's control. It seemed impossible, after years of believing there was no escape. "Congratulations," Adam said quietly beside her, his expression warm with genuine happiness for her. "You did it." "We did it," she corrected him, including Eleanor and Marshal Tanner in her grateful glance. "I couldn't have faced this alone." As they rose to leave, Jeremiah pushed past Mr. Daniels and approached, stopping just short of the distance the judge had ordered him to maintain. His voice was low, meant only for Olivia's ears. "This isn't over, sister dear. Not by a long shot. You've made an enemy today, and sooner or later I'll make you regret it." Before Olivia could respond, Adam stepped forward, placing himself between them. "That sounded remarkably like a threat, Mr. Owens. Would you care to repeat it for Marshal Tanner's benefit?" Jeremiah's eyes narrowed, but he backed away. "Just a family farewell, deputy. Nothing that concerns you." With a final venomous glare, he turned and stalked from the courtroom, the Miller brothers falling in behind him like shadows. Despite her victory, a chill ran through Olivia at her brother's words. She knew Jeremiah well enough to recognize that his threat wasn't empty. He would seek revenge in whatever form he could manage. "Don't worry about him," Adam said, reading her expression. "He won't risk violating the judge's order, not when it would mean jail time." Olivia wished she could share his confidence, but she nodded anyway, not wanting to diminish the triumph of the moment with her fears. As they left the courthouse, stepping into the bright sunlight of midday, well-wishers approached to offer congratulations. Mrs. Larson and Mr. Peterson expressed approval of the judge's decision, while Mrs. Holloway enveloped both sisters in a warm embrace. "I knew justice would prevail," the older woman declared, though Olivia suspected her confidence had been less certain than she now claimed. As they made their way back to the boarding house, Olivia felt a curious mixture of emotions: relief, joy, lingering anxiety about Jeremiah's threat, and an undercurrent of something else, something connected to the man walking beside her, whose steady presence had changed everything. Adam had promised to meet his lawyer friend at the afternoon stage, so he left them at the boarding house with a promise to return later. As he took his leave, his hand lingered on Olivia's for a moment longer than strictly necessary, his eyes conveying something words had not yet expressed. That evening, as Olivia sat on the boarding house porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, she allowed herself to truly contemplate the future for the first time in years. She and Eleanor were free not just legally, but emotionally. They could build lives of their own choosing, pursue dreams that had been suppressed under Jeremiah's control. And perhaps, just perhaps, those dreams might include the man who now approached the boarding house, accompanied by a distinguished-looking gentleman who could only be the lawyer from Santa Fe. Adam's face broke into a smile when he spotted her on the porch, his stride lengthening slightly as though eager to share his news. "Olivia," he called as they reached the gate, "I'd like you to meet my friend James Harrington." "Jim, this is Miss Olivia Owens, the remarkable young woman I told you about." The lawyer, a trim man in his 40s with intelligent eyes and a neatly trimmed beard, bowed slightly. "Miss Owens, a pleasure. Adam has spoken quite highly of you, though I see now his descriptions didn't do you justice." Olivia blushed at the compliment, offering her hand. "Mr. Harrington, I'm so grateful you came all this way, though it seems Judge Wilson has already ruled in our favor." "So Adam informed me," Harrington replied. "Still, I'd like to review the judge's decision and ensure all legal aspects have been properly addressed. Sometimes these rulings leave loose ends that can cause complications later." They settled on the porch, where Olivia recounted the hearing in detail while Harrington listened attentively, occasionally making notes. When she mentioned Jeremiah's parting threat, the lawyer exchanged a meaningful glance with Adam. "Unfortunately, men like your brother rarely accept defeat gracefully," Harrington observed. "It might be prudent to formalize certain protections beyond the judge's ruling." "What do you mean?" Olivia asked, anxiety creeping back into her voice. "Property rights, inheritance matters, physical safety, these can all be more specifically addressed in legal documents." Harrington tapped his pencil against his notepad. "With your permission, I'll draft some papers tomorrow. The sooner we tie up any loose ends, the less opportunity your brother will have to cause trouble." After discussing further details, Harrington excused himself to check into the hotel, leaving Olivia alone with Adam as twilight deepened around them. "You didn't have to bring him all this way," she said softly. "It must have been expensive." Adam shook his head. "Jim owed me a favor from years back. Besides, he's right, it's better to have everything properly documented. Jeremiah isn't the type to give up easily." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky. "Olivia," Adam began, his voice taking on a more serious tone, "there's something I've been wanting to say to you, something that kept getting interrupted." Her heart quickened at his expression. "Yes. I know we haven't known each other long, and I don't want to presume or rush you after everything you've been through." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "But I find myself thinking about you constantly. Admiring your courage, your intelligence, your kindness toward Eleanor despite your own struggles." Olivia's breath caught in her throat as Adam continued. "I understand if you need time to adjust to your independence, time to be sure of your own feelings. But I wanted you to know that my interest in helping you was never just about doing my duty as a deputy. From that first moment in your kitchen, when you stood up to your brother despite your fear, I knew you were someone special." The simple honesty of his declaration touched Olivia deeply. In a society where courtship often involved elaborate rituals and indirect expressions of interest, Adam's straightforward approach was refreshingly genuine. "I don't need time to know my own heart," she replied softly. "You've shown me what a good man truly is, Adam, not through grand gestures, but through consistent decency, respect, and courage. Whatever feelings are growing between us, I'd like the chance to explore them properly." The smile that spread across Adam's face was like sunrise after a long night. "Nothing would make me happier." As if drawn by an invisible force, they leaned toward each other slowly, their breath mingling in the cool evening air. When Adam's lips finally met hers in a gentle, questioning kiss, Olivia felt as though something long broken inside her was finally beginning to heal. The kiss was brief, mindful of propriety even on the darkened porch, but its impact lingered as they drew apart, both slightly breathless. "I should go," Adam said reluctantly, though he made no move to rise. "It's getting late." "Yes, you should," Olivia agreed with equal reluctance. "Mrs. Holloway will be wondering where I am." Neither moved for another long moment, their hands still intertwined between them. Finally, with visible effort, Adam stood. "May I call on you properly tomorrow evening?" he asked. "Perhaps take you to dinner at the hotel." Olivia smiled, happiness bubbling up within her like a spring. "I'd like that very much." As she watched him walk away, his tall figure gradually disappearing into the darkness, Olivia marveled at the turn her life had taken. 1 week ago, she had been trapped in a cycle of fear and submission, believing there was no escape from her brother's tyranny. Now she stood on the threshold of a new life, independent, respected, and beginning to explore feelings for a man who saw her not as property to be controlled, but as a person to be cherished. The path ahead might not be entirely smooth. Jeremiah's threat lingered in the back of her mind, but for the first time in years, Olivia faced the future with hope rather than dread. Whatever challenges awaited, she would no longer face them alone. The following weeks passed in a blur of activity and adjustment. James Harrington remained in Redemption Creek for several days, meticulously drafting legal documents that secured Olivia and Eleanor's independence and protected their interests in the family property. When he finally departed, he left them with the confidence that their position was legally unassailable. Jeremiah, true to his nature, did not accept defeat gracefully. Though he maintained the court-ordered distance, he spread malicious rumors about his sisters whenever opportunity arose. To Olivia's surprise and gratification, these attempts to damage their reputation largely fell flat. The people of Redemption Creek, having witnessed the hearing and formed their own judgments, increasingly sided with the sisters over their volatile brother. Eleanor thrived in her position at the bank, her natural aptitude for numbers earning Mr. Peterson's grudging admiration, and eventually a modest increase in her wages. She began to emerge from her shell, making friends among the other young women in town, and even attracting the attention of the blacksmith's son, a serious young man named Thomas who shared her love of reading. Olivia's work at the dress shop proved equally successful. Mrs. Larson, initially reserved, gradually warmed to her new assistant, as Olivia demonstrated not only skill with a needle, but also an artistic eye for design that brought new customers to the establishment. By the end of summer, she had been promoted to managing alterations entirely on her own, with a corresponding improvement in her compensation. Through it all, her relationship with Adam steadily deepened. Their courtship proceeded with proper decorum: chaperoned outings, dinners at the hotel, walks through town on his days off, but beneath the propriety lay a growing connection that neither had expected to find in Redemption Creek. Adam revealed more of himself as trust grew between them: his childhood in Pennsylvania, the tragedy of his sister's abusive marriage that had driven him west, his determination to use his position as a lawman to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Olivia, in turn, shared memories of her parents, her dreams of eventually opening her own dress shop, her fierce devotion to ensuring Eleanor had the opportunities their parents would have wanted for her. By the time autumn painted the surrounding hills in shades of gold and crimson, their feelings for each other had become common knowledge in town. Mrs. Holloway watched their courtship with barely concealed delight, while Marshal Tanner teased his deputy good-naturedly about spending more time adjusting his collar than checking wanted posters. One crisp October evening, as they walked back from a church social, Adam suggested they take the longer route through the town park. The night was clear, stars scattered across the dark sky like diamonds on velvet, a harvest moon hanging low and golden on the horizon. "It's beautiful tonight," Olivia remarked, her arm tucked comfortably through his, Mrs. Holloway following at a discreet distance that provided the illusion of privacy while maintaining propriety. "Not as beautiful as you," Adam replied, the words simple but sincere. Olivia smiled, still not entirely accustomed to receiving compliments so freely. "Careful, Deputy Quinn. People will think you're sweet on me." People would be right. He guided her to a bench near the small gazebo at the center of the park, gesturing for Mrs. Holloway to take a seat on a nearby bench within sight but not hearing distance. As they sat, Olivia noticed Adam seemed unusually tense, his normally steady hands fidgeting slightly with his hat brim. "Is something wrong?" she asked, concerned. "Wrong? No." He took a deep breath, turning to face her more directly. "Olivia, these past months have been the happiest of my life. Getting to know you, seeing you build a new life for yourself and Eleanor, watching you grow stronger every day, it's been a privilege." The earnestness in his voice made her heart quicken. "I feel the same way, Adam. I never expected to find someone like you, especially not under those circumstances." He smiled briefly at that, then grew serious again. "I've been thinking a lot about the future lately. My future. Your future. Hopefully, our future." Before Olivia could respond, Adam slid from the bench to one knee before her, producing a small velvet box from his pocket. Her breath caught as he opened it, revealing a delicate gold ring set with a modest but beautifully cut diamond. "Olivia Owens, I love you. Your strength, your kindness, your determination. I want to spend the rest of my life by your side if you'll have me. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Though she had begun to suspect the direction of his thoughts in recent weeks, the reality of the moment Adam kneeling before her, offering his heart so openly, overwhelmed her. Tears filled her eyes, blurring the sight of the ring and the beloved face of the man holding it. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Adam, yes." His face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, though she wondered fleetingly how he'd managed that detail. Rising, he drew her to her feet and into a careful embrace, mindful of Mrs. Holloway's watchful presence. "I love you," Olivia said, the words she'd held in her heart for weeks finally spoken aloud. "I never thought I'd find happiness like this, not after everything with Jeremiah. You changed everything." "We changed everything," Adam corrected gently. "I just helped you find the strength that was already there." Mrs. Holloway approached then, her face wreathed in smiles as she spotted the ring gleaming on Olivia's finger. "Well, it's about time," she declared, embracing them both. "I was beginning to wonder if the deputy had lost his nerve." Adam laughed, his arm still around Olivia's waist. "Never, Mrs. Holloway, just waiting for the perfect moment." The walk back to the boarding house was a joyous blur with Mrs. Holloway already planning the announcement in Sunday's church bulletin and speculating about suitable dates for the wedding. Olivia let the older woman's excited chatter wash over her. Her attention focused on the solid presence of Adam beside her and the unfamiliar but welcome weight of the ring on her finger. Eleanor's delight at the news matched Mrs. Holloway's, though expressed more quietly. "I always knew he was the one for you, Livy," she said as they prepared for bed that night. "From that very first evening when he stood up to Jeremiah." "Did you?" Olivia smiled, gazing at the ring in the lamplight. "You were wiser than I was then." "I was too frightened to think about anything beyond escape." Eleanor's expression grew more serious. "Are you afraid of what Jeremiah might do when he hears? He's been quiet lately, but you know how he holds grudges." The question dampened Olivia's happiness slightly. Her brother had indeed been suspiciously subdued in recent weeks, maintaining the court-ordered distance but watching them from afar with undisguised malice. "I won't let fear of Jeremiah shadow this happiness," she said firmly. "He's ruled our lives for too long already." As news of their engagement spread through Redemption Creek, Olivia was touched by the genuine congratulations they received. Even Mrs. Johnson, the banker's wife who had initially been among their most vocal critics, unbent enough to offer her best wishes after church on Sunday. "Deputy Quinn is a fine man," she said with surprising warmth. "And you've proven yourself a respectable young woman despite difficult circumstances. I wish you both happiness." Only one shadow marred their joy. 2 days after the engagement became public knowledge, Adam arrived at the dress shop near closing time, his expression unusually grim. "What is it?" Olivia asked as soon as Mrs. Larson discreetly moved to the front of the shop, giving them a moment of privacy. "Has something happened?" "It's Jeremiah," Adam replied, keeping his voice low. "He came into the saloon last night drinking heavily and making threats. Said I'd stolen what was his and he'd make me pay." Anxiety knotted in Olivia's stomach. "Threats? Against you specifically?" Adam nodded. Marshal Tanner warned him to mind his words, but he was too drunk to heed it. The bartender finally refused to serve him, and the Miller brothers took him home. "What should we do?" "Be vigilant for now." Adam's expression was calm but alert. "I don't think he'd risk direct confrontation, not with the law so clearly against him. But I've asked Marshal Tanner to keep an eye on the farm, and I'd like you and Eleanor to be extra cautious. Don't go anywhere alone, especially after dark." Olivia agreed, though she chafed at the notion that Jeremiah could still affect their lives even now. That evening, she shared Adam's warning with Eleanor and Mrs. Holloway, both of whom promised to take extra precautions. For several days, they lived with heightened awareness, watching for any sign of Jeremiah in town. When nothing occurred, Olivia began to hope that perhaps her brother's threats had been nothing more than drunken bravado, fueled by whiskey and wounded pride. Then, exactly 1 week after Adam's proposal, disaster struck. Olivia was working late at the dress shop, finishing a rush order for Mrs. Peterson's new dinner gown, when she smelled smoke. At first, she thought it might be coming from the blacksmith's forge down the street, but as the acrid scent grew stronger, she moved to the front window. A crowd had gathered in the street, pointing and shouting. Following their gaze, Olivia saw an ominous orange glow in the direction of Mrs. Holloway's boarding house. Heart racing, she abandoned her work and ran outside, heedless of the late hour or the impropriety of a woman alone on the streets after dark. As she rounded the corner onto Oak Street, her worst fears were confirmed. Mrs. Holloway's boarding house was engulfed in flames, the fire spreading rapidly across the dry wooden structure. "Eleanor!" she screamed, pushing through the gathering crowd. "Mrs. Holloway!" A strong arm caught her before she could rush toward the burning building. "They're safe," Adam's voice said in her ear, turning her to where Eleanor and Mrs. Holloway stood huddled beneath a blanket, watching their home burn with shocked expressions. Everyone got out in time. Relief made Olivia's knees weak. She hurried to embrace her sister, noting with horror the soot staining Eleanor's nightgown and the singed ends of her hair. "What happened?" she asked, including both Eleanor and Mrs. Holloway in her questioning gaze. "It started so suddenly," Mrs. Holloway replied, her voice shaking. "We were preparing for bed when I smelled kerosene. By the time I got to the kitchen to investigate, the back of the house was already ablaze." "Kerosene?" Adam's voice sharpened. "You're certain?" The older woman nodded grimly. "I know that smell. Someone doused the back porch with it." "This was no accident, Deputy." Olivia's gaze met Adam's, the same terrible suspicion reflected in both their eyes. "Jeremiah," she whispered. Adam's jaw tightened. "I can't prove it yet, but I intend to." The town rallied around them in the aftermath of the fire. The hotel offered rooms at no charge until other arrangements could be made, while neighbors provided clothing and necessities to replace what had been lost. Mr. Peterson granted Eleanor a few days' leave from the bank, and Mrs. Larson did the same for Olivia. Marshal Tanner launched an immediate investigation, though evidence was scarce. No one had seen anyone suspicious near the boarding house before the fire, and the blaze had destroyed most physical traces that might have identified the culprit. When questioned, Jeremiah produced a solid alibi. He had been at the saloon all evening, in full view of numerous witnesses, including the Miller brothers and the bartender. The marshal couldn't disprove his story, though Adam remained convinced of his involvement. He could have paid someone, he told Olivia as they sat in the hotel restaurant the day after the fire, speaking in hushed tones. There are drifters passing through town who do almost anything for a few dollars. But you can't prove it, Olivia said, the reality settling heavily on her shoulders. Adam shook his head, frustration evident in his expression. Not yet, but I won't stop looking. The fire changed everything. Though no one had been injured, the close call shook Olivia deeply. The idea that Jeremiah might resort to such dangerous measures to exact his revenge terrified her, not for herself, but for those she loved: Eleanor, Mrs. Holloway, and especially Adam, who seemed to be the primary target of her brother's hatred. As they sorted through the charred remains of their belongings a few days later, salvaging what little had survived the flames, Olivia came to a painful decision. When Adam arrived to help them, she asked to speak with him privately, leading him to a quiet corner of the hotel garden. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice steady despite the ache in her heart. "Perhaps we should delay the wedding, just until things settle down with Jeremiah." Adam's expression shifted from surprise to concern. "Delay the wedding?" "Olivia, if you're having doubts, no," she interrupted quickly, reaching for his hands. "No doubts about us, not for a moment. But I'm afraid, Adam. Afraid of what Jeremiah might do next. If the fire was his doing, and we both believe it was, then he's desperate and dangerous. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of me." Understanding dawned in Adam's eyes, followed by a resolute firmness. "Olivia Owens, are you trying to protect me, despite everything?" A small smile tugged at her lips. "Is that so hard to believe?" "Yes," he said bluntly. "Because I became a lawman knowing the risks. And more importantly, because I love you, and nothing, not your brother, not fire, not anything will keep me from making you my wife as planned." He drew her closer, his expression softening. "Besides, do you really think delaying our marriage would appease Jeremiah? Or would it just show him that his tactics are working?" Put that way, the answer was clear. "You're right," Olivia admitted. I couldn't live with myself if you were hurt because of my family's troubles." "There are troubles now," Adam corrected gently. "Yours and mine together, that's what marriage means." His unwavering commitment melted the last of Olivia's resolve. Reaching up, she touched his cheek, her heart full. "How did I get so fortunate to find you in the midst of all this?" Adam turned his head slightly to press a kiss to her palm. "I ask myself the same question every day." With renewed determination, they proceeded with their wedding plans. The ceremony was scheduled for the first Saturday in November, just 3 weeks away. Mrs. Holloway, now staying with her sister on the other side of town, threw herself into the preparations with characteristic energy, declaring that a proper celebration was exactly what everyone needed after such a trying time. Olivia chose a simple but elegant wedding dress, which she worked on during quiet moments at the dress shop under Mrs. Larson's approving eye. Eleanor was to be her only attendant, while Adam asked Marshal Tanner to stand as his best man. The ceremony would take place in the small church where the Owens family had worshipped for generations, followed by a reception at the hotel. As the wedding day approached, Jeremiah maintained his distance, making no further overt threats or suspicious movements. This compliance, far from reassuring Olivia, only increased her apprehension. Her brother was not a man to surrender easily, and his apparent acceptance of their marriage seemed wholly out of character. The night before the wedding, as Eleanor helped her with final adjustments to her dress at their hotel room, Olivia voiced her concerns. "It's too quiet. Jeremiah's planning something, I can feel it." Eleanor sighed, setting aside her needle. "Livy, you can't let fear of Jeremiah overshadow your wedding day. That's exactly what he'd want." "I know, but no buts," Eleanor interrupted with uncharacteristic firmness. "Adam has taken every precaution. Marshal Tanner has deputies watching the farm. The church will be full of people tomorrow. Jeremiah may be spiteful, but he's not foolish enough to cause trouble in front of the entire town." Olivia wanted to believe her sister was right. She tried to push her anxiety aside as they completed the final preparations, focusing instead on the joy that awaited her the next day when she would become Mrs. Adam Quinn. The wedding morning dawned clear and crisp, the November air carrying the scent of pine from the surrounding hills. As Eleanor helped her dress, arranging her hair in an elegant chignon adorned with tiny white flowers, Olivia felt a strange calm settle over her. Whatever happened, by sunset she would be Adam's wife. That certainty outweighed all fears. Mrs. Holloway arrived to escort them to the church, her normally practical demeanor softened by the occasion. "You look radiant, my dear," she told Olivia, genuine affection in her voice. "Adam Quinn is a fortunate man indeed." The small church was filled to capacity when they arrived, nearly everyone in Redemption Creek having turned out for the event. As Olivia waited in the church vestibule for the ceremony to begin, she peered through the door at the assembled guests, her heart full at the sight of so many familiar faces: Mrs. Larson and her husband, Mr. Peterson and his wife, shopkeepers, miners, ranchers and their families. Her gaze swept over them, then faltered. In the last row, partially hidden in shadow, sat Jeremiah. He was alone, separated from the other guests by an empty pew on either side, as though the townspeople had instinctively created distance between themselves and the man who had become a pariah in their community. He wore his Sunday best, his expression unreadable from this distance. Olivia's heart hammered against her ribs. "He's here," she whispered to Eleanor. "Jeremiah, in the back row." Eleanor's eyes widened in alarm. "Should we tell Marshal Tanner, have him removed?" After a moment's consideration, Olivia shook her head. "No, he's maintaining the required distance. And it is our family's church." A sudden realization struck her. Perhaps he's come to make peace. The hope was fragile, probably foolish, but on this day of all days, Olivia wanted to believe in the possibility of reconciliation. Jeremiah had been their beloved older brother once, before grief and bitterness had twisted him. Was it so impossible that he might remember that bond, even now? Before she could dwell further on his presence, the organist began playing, signaling the start of the ceremony. Eleanor squeezed her hand reassuringly before proceeding down the aisle as her maid of honor. Then it was Olivia's turn. Taking a deep breath, she stepped into the church proper, her gaze immediately finding Adam waiting at the altar. The sight of him tall and handsome in his formal suit, his eyes filled with undisguised love as he watched her approach, drove all other thoughts from her mind. In that moment, nothing else mattered, not Jeremiah's presence, not the fire, not the struggles of the past. There was only Adam and the future they would build together. The ceremony passed in a blur of emotion. Olivia was barely conscious of the minister's words, focused instead on Adam's hands holding hers, the warmth in his eyes as they exchanged vows, the gentle way he slipped the simple gold band onto her finger to join her engagement ring. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." Adam's kiss was gentle but firm, a promise sealed before God and their community. As they turned to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Quinn for the first time, applause erupted throughout the church. Olivia's gaze was drawn inevitably to the back row, where Jeremiah still sat. To her surprise, he was standing with the others, though his face remained impassive. As their eyes met across the length of the church, he gave a single, slight nod before turning and walking out the side door. The gesture was so unexpected, so ambiguous, that Olivia wasn't sure how to interpret it. Was it acknowledgement, acceptance, or something else entirely? She had no time to puzzle over it as they were swept into the receiving line, accepting congratulations from what seemed like the entire town. The reception at the hotel was equally joyous, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed twice their number throughout the celebration. Olivia watched for any sign of Jeremiah, but he did not reappear. His brief presence at the church remained a mystery, one that nagged at the back of her mind despite her happiness. As the evening wound down and they prepared to depart for the small house Adam had purchased on the edge of town, their new home Marshal Tanner approached them with an unusual expression. "I hate to intrude on your celebration," he said, "but I thought you should know. Jeremiah Owens came to my office after the ceremony, asked me to give you this." He handed Adam a sealed envelope. Olivia and Adam exchanged puzzled glances before Adam carefully opened it. Inside was a short note written in Jeremiah's distinctive hand, along with a small brass key. "For Olivia and Eleanor," Adam read aloud, his voice low enough that only Olivia and the marshal could hear. "The deed to the farm is in Father's desk, top right drawer. This key opens it. The land is rightfully yours. I'm leaving for California on tonight's stage. Jeremiah." Stunned silence followed the reading. Olivia took the note from Adam's hands, reading it again to convince herself she hadn't misheard. "He's giving us the farm," she whispered, disbelieving. "Appears so," Marshal Tanner confirmed. "I checked with the stage office. He bought a ticket yesterday one way to Sacramento, had his bags with him when he came to my office." "I don't understand," Olivia said, her mind struggling to reconcile this unexpected development with everything that had happened. After all this time, all the hatred, why? Adam shook his head, equally bewildered. "Perhaps seeing you at the church, happy and moving forward with your life. Maybe it finally made him realize he couldn't win." "Or maybe," Olivia suggested, a lump forming in her throat, "somewhere beneath all that bitterness, he remembered he's our brother, that our parents would have wanted us to have the farm eventually. They would never know for certain what had prompted Jeremiah's sudden change of heart. Whether it was surrender, a moment of clarity, or some remnant of familial feeling, the result was the same: he was gone, and the shadow he had cast over their lives had lifted. "What will you do with the farm?" Marshal Tanner asked. Olivia looked at Adam, a question in her eyes. "I'm not sure yet," she answered honestly. "It's been in our family for generations, but there are difficult memories there now." "We have time to decide," Adam said, his arm around her waist. "Together." As they bid farewell to their guests and departed for their new home, Olivia felt a curious sense of closure. The cycle that had begun that fateful evening when Adam had intervened in her brother's violence had come full circle. She had gained not only freedom from fear, but also the love of a good man, the respect of her community, and now, unexpectedly, her family's legacy restored. In the weeks and months that followed, Olivia and Adam settled into married life with a joy that seemed to deepen daily. Eleanor continued to live in town, boarding with Mrs. Larson and her husband while maintaining her position at the bank. Her friendship with the blacksmith's son, Thomas, gradually evolved into a tentative courtship, much to Olivia's delight. After much discussion, Adam and Olivia decided to keep the farm but hire a capable manager to oversee its operation. The house itself they left closed, its painful memories too fresh to consider returning. Perhaps someday, Olivia thought, they might rebuild there, creating new memories to replace the old. For now, their cozy home in town, filled with love and free from fear, was more than enough. True to his word, Jeremiah did not return. Occasionally, news reached them through business contacts. He had established himself in Sacramento, working in a mercantile that supplied miners heading to the goldfields. He never wrote directly, and they did not seek further contact, but the knowledge that he had found his own path brought Olivia a measure of peace. 1 year to the day after Adam had first intervened in the Oswald kitchen, they held a small gathering in their home to celebrate. Mrs. Holloway, whose boarding house had been rebuilt with the town's help, brought her famous apple pie. Eleanor and Thomas came together, their relationship now officially acknowledged. Marshal Tanner attended with his wife, as did Mrs. Larson and her husband. As they sat around the table sharing memories of the past year, Adam raised his glass in a toast. "To new beginnings," he said, his gaze finding Olivia's across the table, "and to speaking up, even when it's dangerous." "To speaking up," everyone echoed, but Olivia added quietly for Adam's ears alone, "and to the man who said he won't again." Later that night, as they prepared for bed in their comfortable home, Adam pulled Olivia into his arms, his expression unusually serious. "Happy?" he asked, studying her face in the lamplight. "Completely," she assured him, resting her hands on his chest. "Why do you ask?" He hesitated, then smiled. "I was just thinking about how far we've come, how different things might have been if I hadn't been riding past your farm that evening." "I wonder about that too sometimes," Olivia admitted. "But then I remember something my mother used to say, that God doesn't always prevent storms, but he makes sure help arrives when we need it most." Adam's smile deepened as he drew her closer. "Your mother was a wise woman." "She was," Olivia agreed, rising on tiptoe to kiss him softly. "And I think she would have liked you very much." As the lamp burned low and they prepared to sleep, Olivia reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. From fear and oppression to love and freedom, from silence to the strength of her own voice. The path had not been easy, but standing here now, in the arms of the man who had helped her find her courage, she wouldn't change a single step. In a land as wild and unpredictable as the Arizona Territory, where law and justice sometimes seemed as fluid as the desert sands, they had carved out something precious and enduring, a love built on mutual respect, shared courage, and the unshakable belief that every voice, even the softest, deserved to be heard.